It is starting, and this is yesterday. None of you people were, or 2 days ago, the last call that I tried to organize on the community thing, I was in this new blockchain co-working space, and everything was failing because the internet was going in and out, and I was getting these weird 500 server errors. So hopefully today is a better day on that side of things. So what we do in this, thank you all for coming and showing up. The main thing that happens on these calls is this part of this community of communities group that Robbie and Tor have kind of started up. And the idea here is to have some cross-project kind of collaboration and co-evolution to kind of share knowledge that we have, share learning, share challenges, and try to work through them. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to spend a little bit of time on intros at the beginning. Then we're going to spend most of our time doing this lean coffee style format where we kind of put a bunch of ideas on the Trello board and then up prioritize them and then talk through them as a group. And then we'll spend the final 5 minutes essentially in a retro. So with that, let's start with some intros, starting in my mind from left to right. So Jason, do you want to give us a quick little 30-second intro?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So Jason, I'm with the Aeon project. So we're here in Toronto. Right now, we're trying to schedule kind of like a global takeover in terms of hitting cities all over the world over the next 8 months. So we're looking to hit 16 cities. And we run a pretty big community. We have basically a community on every platform from Discord to Telegram and lots of lessons learned. So hit me up if we have any questions there.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Jason. Kartik?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Kartik.
I'm saying your name wrong every time.
No worries at all. I work at a VC firm called SV Angel. Before that, I was very involved in the community in Waterloo and Toronto. And we were the people who originally started and kind of ran Hack the North as well as ETH Waterloo. So for the context of this meeting, I am one of the founders of ETH Global. That's an initiative we're piloting that is going to essentially scale events like ETH Waterloo and ETH Denver to multiple other cities around the world. And it's kind of just still in the works. We're planning to announce that in the next week and a half or so. So
just as a note, Kartik, this is a live stream, so
yes. I mean the details of it. I don't have any problems saying it's called ETH Global, and the goal is to spin out events like ETH Waterloo and ETH Denver and a few more. So we're just going to be announcing a bit more formal route to what that is and then what that will look like in the future. So.
Awesome, cool, thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, so I am from Singapore, and I've been living in Vancouver for a while, where Jared and I met at our community space in Vancouver called Decentral.
Also known as Decontrol.
Yeah, and it's basically like this Mr. Robot hack space / members club / crypto community space and everything. So we met there, and then we met our CEO at one of our Intro to ETH events that we were running.
Yeah.
And my background is in project management and design, and we both worked on the community side, and now I focus more on business, and Jared can talk.
Yeah, so we're kind of more focused on the community. So yeah, I'm Jared, also part of the control, as he said, on for this and before Decontrol, been one of the old admins for ETHTrader Telegram. And so kind of that, yeah, so we focus our communities mostly on Telegram. We're just kind of, we don't really want to do a migration, not anytime soon, because it just seems like there's a lot of drop off. So we're actually trying to find ways to scale that out. You know, with the whole back end of the API and stuff so we're just kind of dealing with the scaling issues on that right now.
Cool, thank you. Let's go to Ludmila.
Hello everyone. I'm sorry about my camera is not working. But so my name is Ludmila. I'm from Optus. I'm here at the office with most of the team. Most of us are Brazilian, and we have a Swiss guy, Rafael, as well. My background, I'm a software engineer, so this community management thing is really new for me. So I'm here to get a lot of tips, and I can share everything that I've learned already. I participated in the Slack migration with Tato and guys from the other projects. So now we are at Rocket Chat, but Telegram started to grow so fast that now we're getting used to Telegram, and Telegram community is growing fast, getting used to all those memes, those when exchange things. So yeah, I'm excited about having this brainstorming with you guys.
Great, thanks for being here. Robbie?
Hey guys, I run TrueBit, in charge of like team building and all our external initiatives. We're pretty much solely focused on building within the crypto community. So getting as many good engineers and researchers working together on scaling issues, and then also tying together all of the community operations, people to share best practices. We haven't really focused on any external stuff yet. So in terms of like investors and stuff, no experience there. We're leading an ETH Bounties project. We did this Mary Merkel charity project, open to consults on like new and crazy ideas that just bring the community together. So really nice to meet everybody.
Great, thank you, Robert, aka Robbie. And I'm Reese, and yeah, I mostly work at the intersection between projects, so I'm not aligned with any given project, so I am not incentivized to help any more of you more than anyone else of you. And yeah, just trying to, my main goal is to kind of, facilitate this cross collaboration, co-evolution, both from a mindset perspective, but also from a facilitation perspective. And I also have a podcast in this, and then do the organizing at ETH Denver as well, especially from a content perspective. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start the lean coffee. So if everybody gets on in the little, both in the Telegram and on the chat here, I'm putting the Trello link, making sure that everyone has, is on there. We got Don, we got Christian, we got Jason, we got Ludmilla. So the way that this works is, and now Robbie's on there. So there's a column called #2 events. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend, maybe 5 or so minutes, or probably like 3 or so minutes, typing in random things into this events column, things that you'd like to chat about, things that you have questions on, challenges, questions for the other people. And then after we put them all on the board, then we're going to kind of, after crowdsourcing the options, we're going to crowdsource which ones we talk about by voting on them. So that's how a lean coffee works. Does that all make sense? Just a thumbs up. Cool. So let's spend a little bit of time, maybe 3 minutes right now. What questions do you have, or challenges do you have, or things that you just want to talk about, and specifically around this event side? And I've also kind of added ones already there from the Google Doc.
Do we add that to, the Trello board?
Say that again?
Did I add that to the?
Add them to the Trello board. Yep, exactly. So take about 3 minutes and add them to the Trello board.
#1, community call?
Sorry, nope, to #2 events. So the one on the far right side.
Are there notes from this first call? Some of these questions look really awesome. I kind of want to dig.
Yeah, I will share those notes later.
Yeah, that's great.
But for now, Robbie, keep on writing questions into that events column.
How do I vote? Okay.
Take about 1 more minute to add any other things to that events column, questions, topics of conversation. And then after that, we're going to vote on them as well. So if you're voting now, that's cool, but we're also going to have some specific voting time. Cool. So get your final ones in there. And now we're going to take probably let's take a minute to vote on. There are a total of like 12 or so cards here. So let's have everybody, you get about 4 votes each. So do 3 to 5 votes, the ones that you want to talk about, and then we'll up prioritize those. And you vote by pressing the letter V on a given card.
Maybe leave the V as a comment.
No, don't leave the V as a comment, but instead put your mouse over the card and then press the letter V, and that should vote on that card. Okie dokie, take 15 more seconds, get your final votes in. And I'm gonna start moving some cards. Okie dokie. So the way that this works now is we essentially, so we've prioritized these things as a group, and we're gonna spend, I have my phone, and we essentially take one of these cards and you spend, I'll put a timer on, so we chat about, like, for example, large scale event organizing. We're gonna chat about that for 5 minutes, and then after that bit of time, we'll vote as a group how much more time we want to vote on that, or how much more time we want to talk about that, rather. I think this large scale event organizing was from the shared Google Doc. So I'll talk about this card. So large scale event organizing is the card. I know that Kartik and I have done this and are doing this now. I'm not sure exactly what kind of questions or comments people have on this, whether they're looking to organize their own events, wondering which ones they want to go to, or what are people thinking? Everybody voted on the card, so.
Large scale events. I mean, I think there's a lot of, there's tons of events that kind of talk about ICOs and all that stuff, but I don't, and there's a bunch of big ones that talk about developer stuff, but there really isn't big ones that talk about community. There is one happening this weekend, but it's not a very big one. And I personally believe that blockchain is a living, breathing kind of protocol kind of thing to think about it, and communities are by and large an extension of that, and also very much influence governance. And I think there's a bit of a gap there for large events on that.
So I think like most of the events we see are like, they're like developer focused completely, or they're like sort of ICO panels and all this other stuff. How do we get like stuff that's actually bringing in people who are not in blockchain to be a developer or a businessman? I think that's also interesting thing to do.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, at ETH Denver specifically, we are trying to do, we have like a bunch of like decentralized governance stuff happening with like Aragon and DAO Stack and what have you. And then we are also trying to push the community side as well, and the kind of event community organization side. So hopefully we're going to be pushing some more ground on that. I also know that an event that I'm not sure who exactly is organizing it, but there's a big kind of Ethereum community of communities event happening in France, in Paris, like March 5th through 6th. And I can put that link on there as well. So I think these things are starting to push more. Is anybody here actively, besides like Kartik and I, actively thinking about organizing these large events themselves?
We are,
yeah.
But I think we are starting small because we're kind of like in Y Combinator and building our product and stuff as well. So like, but we want to scale up and eventually, and if that means like joining other people and collaborating rather than trying to just do, quant stamps event, that could also be very interesting.
Yeah, we'd be very up for that. Yeah. We're very interested in building communities that support the larger ecosystem. And we're very interested in also scaling out to give people the tools to build their own events as well. So that's kind of where our head's at least.
I think there's definitely good. The one thing I'd say is it's a lot more work than you'd expect, and then also that there is, I think, and we're starting to move towards this with something like ETH Global, and I know for us at ETH Denver, we've gotten so much help from the ETH Global, ETH Waterloo crew, and being able to. So I think that kind of making it the case that people can that we can pop up these large scale events more easily as a community is, I think, something that we're moving towards, both from a best practice perspective and I think longer term from a weirdly crowd generate the schedule, crowd generate the sponsors, crowd generate all the things. I think that we'll start to see some of that over time. The infrastructure is not quite in place yet.
Even just starting small scale for regular people to just start making events in their local areas is very interesting to us.
Yep.
And also another question regarding that is we want to have our community act as known with our project.
Yeah.
So how can we have a system where it's sort of less of trusting people and more hey, you have an interesting proposal to make an event, how do you
having the confidence in them and them having the confidence to do it, and you can just let them do it as in their own way, but have the confidence that it's going to be in best interest of the community.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's up near Robbie.
I was just going to talk about two ways. We're looking at doing events now, not necessarily large scale, but to the confidence point, you can really do these quick and dirty if you're not worried about quality of food and lodging and all this stuff. And for example, last week I reached out to Stanford Business School. Cold reach out, just said, hey, I'm really interested in talking to people from the business school or Stanford in general who are non-technical but want to get into blockchain. So these community roles that you guys mentioned, they actually just invited me to come speak to the entire business school. Didn't really plan anything, invited the guys from Polychain, and we just said we're going to do a panel if you guys want to source questions. Boom, took 10 minutes of time. So I think blockchain is people want to know about it now. So if you have an idea, just reach out cold. And then another thing we're doing, which is kind of cool, I think we've seen a lot of response to creativity. And so when you say oh, this is for developers or this is for token people, you can do stuff that's not really targeted at any of them, but that's different. So what Reese is doing at ETH Denver, they have an art bounty. And then they also have potentially a fundraising bent for charity. So these type of things, I think really to QuantStamp's point, are driving this more of a community feeling. One thing that we're going to do as a large event in New York, we're actually building this Doge Ethereum installation. It's going to be a massive 100-foot Burning Man style installation, and we're going to launch it with a party. Inside there'll be a ton of art connected to the blockchain. There'll probably be some talks and then house music, DJ, something like that. So I guess just two things is, one, if you're thinking about events, it's get as creative and crazy as possible. I've seen the community responds really well to weird stuff. So Dogecoin sponsoring the Jamaican bobsled team, this kind of stuff. I think the first time I've seen where you can just be creative as possible and no one's going to tell you no. So don't be afraid to reach out and then be creative as possible are two things I think that work really well.
I think those are great tips. And with that, our timer is up. So everybody, we now vote in the chat window of the Google Hangout. You'll type into the side a number between 0 and 4 for how many minutes you want to chat about this thing. So everybody on the right-hand side say hey, I'd like to chat about this thing X more minutes. So in the Google Hangout on the side, yeah, boom, nice work, Krishna. You get first. Okay. Ludmilla and Jason, it's on the right-hand side of the Google Hangout link, but it looks like we're going to take about 2 more minutes on this. And for someone who voted, Kartik, what kind of things are on your mind and chatting about here?
I'm just mostly interested in hearing everybody's perspectives, mainly because you wouldn't get to see that or hear that any other time, especially live in a discussion format. It's kind of interesting because a very common thing here is that everybody kind of talks about the importance of community, but at the same time, it gets harder to essentially differentiate between the line of a community for your personal thing, which is the company you represent or the project you're working on, or the global or a broader community of the chain or the entire region. So it's just very much segmented on kind of the angle you look at this from. So it's kind of interesting to hear your thoughts on like how does, for example, like Trubit see that from their side, or the Quantstamp people see from their end, versus like ETH Global, which is like a very much project agnostic. Ethereum not agnostic to any specific Ethereum project, but it's still project agnostic for Ethereum community itself. So kind of was just curious to see like why people want to do this thing in their respective neighborhoods, and then kind of how they see that in terms of what the priorities are and what they should be. For us, it's mostly a very much a long-term view on, we think that the number one goal and priority is right now to bring on developers that can actually use Ethereum for whatever it may be. And if you are trying to ramp up somebody from, hey, like you've been coding web apps or whatever before, you can now do something similar on this thing called Ethereum. That is not an easy transition that can be done in a week or a weekend or even a month. So it's a very much a couple year, if not more, process of kind of bringing people together to care about it or think about something in a different way. So like, how do you look at that and align things so that it's a multi-year plan or a very much longer term plan? And the goal is that like you won't know until that time has passed. And the best you can do is kind of have an idea of what direction you're going. And if that direction kind of matches essentially like what you think it should have been. So you kind of start somewhere and then hope that you have better ways to measure if it's working or not. But the downside is that you won't find out if it worked until at least a year or two have passed.
Yep. Cool. Well, with that, our 2 minutes is up. So and my one final note is, yeah, that I think that the attention here often is to drive for developers versus that kind of creative piece, diversity piece, social impact piece. So that's kind of a tension that almost anybody will feel as they do this large scale event organizing. Okay, cool. This building developer communities where none exist card. Let's take 5 minutes on that. Krishna, do you want to kind of explain what this is about and ask any questions?
Yeah, so to give you guys some context, I was just in Japan with Don, my colleague, and Richard, our founder, and we went there to just discover Japan and sort of like have an open mind and have like a community meetup there. But what we discovered is that they've got all this infrastructure around Bitcoin. They don't have anything around Ethereum, but they have an interest. But the main problem that we discovered is not that they can't grasp like smart contracts, is that developers there actually have like no documentation or sort of developer content to start like sort of using as a resource. So our idea is to build a developer community in Japan, and we do have like, you know, all the other stuff figured out, like how do we sponsor this, how do we get people to organize this, all that stuff is figured out. But like, if you guys have any ideas on what's the best way to drive that initiative forward in terms of actual content or sort of like facilitating that, I'd like to know. I would like to hear about your experiences.
One note from me just in Denver is Denver had some like blockchain cryptocurrency things happening, but the big push recently was the way that we did it was you got to be on. I mean, for us, clearly we're on the ground and that's powerful. Organizing the kind of things like meetups and what have you, and then telling the story about why people are there, I think is the final key part, which is like, hey, you're here, you've come to this thing, and here's this beautiful story of the future. That kind of combination of being on the ground, organizing lots of like community-based kind of chill sessions, and then telling the big story has been powerful in Denver.
I find holistic, very low barrier kind of events going to be very powerful because people have this mentality that blockchain is all about tech and I cannot access that. But when you make it chill and low barrier, and it's like, actually our values are this, and this is why we're in here, people are very receptive to that.
Yeah. Has anybody else in this group started a community in a place where there was none before?
We are trying to do something like this here in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys can't imagine our best conferences about blockchain. They're like, I'm ashamed of them. It's almost a tutorial on how to buy Bitcoin, and it's like the biggest conference in Brazil. So, and we are starting to get some people together, but not around the development first, but around to get to know the technology. I always I'm not too much sure if the best thing is to target the developers first or the standard community first. We are trying both ways, but sometimes we go to some meetups that they're going to talk about blockchain and they don't know like nothing about blockchain. So sometimes I think it's better to target the developers first or the standard community first. What do you guys think?
In Vancouver with Decontrol, we have, we would have like every 2 weeks there's an intro to Bitcoin. Every month there's an intro to cryptocurrencies, and then we were doing intro to Ethereum. We sort of like said we have to understand what blockchain is, but at the same point, these are beginner talks, and they're every single month. So there's always going to be a churn rate of new people who are curious, and then every Saturday night is just open hang. So there's sort of avenues for new people to come in, and then the more developer type talks. So, those are super important because, you'll find, I've found that over the years of like talking about this kind of stuff, that even developers and even like technical people don't know what blockchain is, and you still have to explain from a very beginner basic level what a blockchain is. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. It's still going to be the same story. It's just how you approach it.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I think it's better to come like top down. Like you talk about the introduction first, and then you get the curiosity of developers. Developers, they are curious by nature. So yeah, I think it's a good strategy.
It helps to talk about philosophy and ethos too. I find that helps bring other people to understand it too.
Yeah. One note on this as well is I think it's very powerful, not just the in-person perspective, but having a clear call to action to an online group, whether it's a Facebook group or a Slack channel or whatever, has been super powerful, especially because you can then people can kind of adjust their own timing and schedule to how their excitement. So like they're like, oh my God. And they'll just like, people would just be randomly posting like random articles all the time in these groups. And I don't really respond to them, but there are other people liking them, commenting. So kind of allows for anybody who's at that given level to also give with them and start these like good, like variable reward loops around like getting likes and things from stuff like that. And with that, we are out of time. So on the right-hand side, write down how many minutes more you'd like to chat about this. And this is building developer communities where none exist. Strong 0 from the people. Okay, let's move on. So this next one is how to think about hackathon versus conference. This is my question. I'm going to have a 4-minute timer for this one. And I guess the high level thing here is, especially from a perspective of someone who's coming to one of these things, is it more powerful to go to a hackathon? Is it more powerful to go to a conference? That's kind of the open question to the group. So what do people think about this, Robbie? It looks like you have an opinion.
I have like a super strong opinion on this. I'm like done with conferences. We get invited to one like every 2 days, and there are some good ones. So like DevCon I went to, had an amazing time. I'm going to go to this ETHCC one you mentioned, the ETH Community Commons. It's got a really good reputation. Outside of that, I want to focus all my time on hackathons, places where developers are, where people are actually building. There's no talk of like ICOs. There's all these people who are so excited about the new technology. You can figure out like what's actually possible. There's this like really cool ethos of like moving forward. And so I'm just literally spending all our time now at either developer meetups or hackathons. And you'll find that there's also people who aren't technical that can go to these and learn. And so I don't think it's a barrier. And I'm really burnt out the ICO and like conference type of circuits. And so I just think you get a way more personal vibe if you're looking to meet good people and you want like best bang for your buck, the best exposure you're going to get, and where people are more friendly and where you can learn about technology, like hackathons, 1,000%. And just by the way, ETH Waterloo was the best hackathon I've ever been to, and I'm super stoked for ETH Denver. So huge thanks for putting that on.
Thank you. Does anybody want to do a devil's advocate on that? Anybody who's pro, who wants to be pro conferences, or why are conferences great?
I think I'm very anti-conference. I think there are like two.
That wasn't my question.
I want to reiterate on that. Like it's all like, I just don't like this vibe of like people in suits and stuff. I connected to blockchain in a basement space with Jared, like guys wearing like sweatshirts and stuff. So like I'm like, when I go to conferences and I just talk to like people, it's like everyone wants to like take something from each other, whereas in like these developer oriented things or community oriented things, like how can we just like chill and like also learn like how can we build a long-term relationship where it's not about like, oh, what can you do for me or what can I do for you?
Adding to your comments, not taking.
I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and I'll caveat that by saying like I'm not a fan of conferences, but it doesn't mean that you have to have a binary opinion on this thing. I think it's important to recognize that the importance of a conference is that it's a better platform that can be organized much more easily, because the only thing, it's a very much a one-sided type of event where somebody's on stage and they're speaking to an audience, and there might be a part where they interact, but overall it's not a many-to-many sort of relationship. Somebody's there to kind of broadcast their message, whatever it may be, from an announcement to discussion to kind of seeing what the outlook is for the future. Given that we're all biased in terms of kind of being developers or being very much embedded in this community, we're naturally kind of gravitating towards, let's have a developer focused thing, because we've just found that our interactions with people who are not developers or not directly talking about things that are just price have not been that great. So I think it's still important to recognize that you still have to manage two sides of this equation, where you have to bring in people and you need incentives for people as well as kind of well-known people in this space, whether they're the judges that are showing up at a hackathon or a conference, that kind of need to broadcast their message to a better audience. And it's not a bad thing that there's conferences exist or like they should not be attended with. It's just that you can manage the ratio properly. So kind of having an element of having people talk or introduce panels or just in general having a presence of people who are not directly hacking, but also kind of evangelizing what things are in this community is still very much important. And these are the elements that we try to put that in whether it's Waterloo, where you had talks on like Joseph Poon was describing what the Lightning Network is. Not only do you get to see Joseph Poon in the audience as somebody who's like, oh, I've heard of this thing, or I know this guy is amazing because I follow him on GitHub, but I've never seen this person in real life. Those elements of kind of fandom, I guess, are very much important and relevant. But you can ensure that the audience there is a better filter for who the audience should be for the event you're trying to cater. So I don't think conferences are bad. It's just that you do not want something that is purely one-sided as a conversation, which most conferences end up being.
Cool. How many more minutes would we like to take on this? Write your little things on conferences and hackathons. Robbie has always zeroed. That's fun. Ludmila, what are your thoughts on this? We're going to take one more minute.
My opinion is like in the middle. Of course, just hackathon events, I don't think it's enough to engage the community, but I don't like huge conferences because I can hear a guy talking like on YouTube. I don't need to go there to watch this. I like those small events where you have coffee breaks and you can talk to people and they are focused on a subject. Like not just a blockchain huge event. No, you can focus on specific subjects and then it's easier to interact with each one. I like this kind of events more than huge conferences.
I think we're in still a mode right now where the one-to-end style that Kartik and you are describing is still the status quo, and breaking out of that is hard. It's
a function of a scale of the event in terms of the people that show up, not necessarily like what the event is. You can still have great conferences like look at DEF CON 1 or 2 in video, like small audience, and even though it's a very much we're announcing this and this is what we're doing, it's still possible to have very much engaging interactions there. But yeah, like if you have 1,000-person event where everybody's there to like learn more or like buy or sell whatever that their incentives are, then it gets tough and hard for sure. Cool.
So let's move on to the next one here. Let's talk about this local community building one. We chatted about this a bit in terms of making it in a new space, but what are people's thoughts on how much they should be engaging with their local like meetups, their local, how to build like their local community versus just going to some of these like bigger events?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out myself here in San Francisco. I'll be honest. It's a little easier in Vancouver because it's kind of like this ready-built community. It's all really very central in one particular area, and then lots of events sort of spring up around that. But there's always like connections between that. It feels so. I'm still trying to explore that for San Francisco.
My personal vibe on some of this stuff is, I feel like it's a good, for me personally, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to go to the meetup because it's like a bunch of noobs or whatever. And it's like, that's not a good use of my time. But I feel like it's important to kind of have that kind of giving mindset, that kind of like learning, teaching mindset around these things. And to like, and if you're a part of a bigger company, or for me as like kind of a single person, to make sure I still go to those things every once in a while. I personally feel like that feels better to me than just being a group that doesn't interact with the community around them.
We've been trying something here that we created at first a WhatsApp group called Crypto for Dummies. And we put some friends on it. It started with like 20 friends, 30 friends, and then it grew so big that we have to put it on Telegram because it couldn't fit a WhatsApp group anymore. And now I think we have hundreds and hundreds of people there. So we started like this, and sometimes we use our old company. We used to, almost all of us work together in an IT company. Sometimes we are really friends of the owner, so we use the space sometimes to make some meetups, and we present the basics of blockchain, so people reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we are trying to grow a community like that. And we really enjoy talking about blockchain all the time. So that's the way we do, starting at WhatsApp.
Cool. Any other thoughts or questions on this card about how to work with your local community? I guess one thing that I might have a question on is, and this is kind of connected to some of these other cards, but other ways that aren't meetups to engage with your local community. And I guess like Robbie, could you tell us a little bit more about kind of the experiments you're doing with your house out there, and how has it been successful, unsuccessful compared to other local community building things?
Yeah, so 2 points. One I went to that was really cool in Nashville. Chris Hutchison, who's like amazing community manager for Status, organized a meetup at Top Golf. And so it was like golfing at a driving range with like drink, Ethereum stuff, but like partly hanging out. It was really fun. And they had a really good crew of people. Some of the stuff we're doing at the house, that's really cool. Like, the same house near San Francisco, so we can work all week and invite people at events. I work really well as having speakers and different types of speakers. So like one thing we've been doing is inviting people from Stanford Crypto Lab to give talks on like super technical subjects. Now it's not for everybody, but the people who are in the community really love it. So I guess if you like segment your events, so some are like, you know, for community and noobs, but some are for like the real hardcore believers. So we had this guy, Benedict Bluns, who's a PhD researcher, and he spoke on Bulletproof, ZK Snarks and Starks and like crazy cryptography. And I mean, 20 people showed up and really loved it. On the flip side, we'll have like full-on protocol design sessions. So we'll invite 5-6 projects. We'll put it out on Twitter. We'll let, you know, have it completely collaborative and open so anyone can join. And then we'll just order a bunch of pizza and we'll literally sit and like we'll talk about one protocol and how it's designed, and then like what might work better, and just jam together and then write a Google Doc and share it with everybody. And every time we've used collaboration instead of working on our project ourselves, it's actually turned out way better. So we did another thing. We reached out to all the Y Combinator batch who are involved in crypto and invited them to come for a day. And then we asked everybody what they'd like to talk about. And it came up like, how is blockchain development different than web development? And how can we make blockchain development faster? And so now there's going to be like a 3-hour seminar around where each company just talks about their problems. And so I've found that people really like to come out to a cool house. And then we unfortunately haven't focused a lot on like building the community from scratch or focusing on noobs. I guess all the events we've done so far are really like targeted at people who are already in the community working on projects to bring them together. And it's been super successful, and people have seemed to really like it. And so again, you know, for us, where we've seen value is focusing within the community of, you know, active projects already. Jared had a really awesome event coming up next week, which maybe he wants to talk about, that he invited me to, that I'm super excited for.
Yes.
Also at a house.
Anyone who is in San Francisco, you're more than welcome to come. This Friday, not today, but the following Friday, we're gonna get all the YC people, because we're in YC right now. Just like have a really chill night, a bunch of lightning talks. So crypto people, by and large, not actually talking about crypto. So Robbie will be speaking about the Doji at the Bridge, but we're gonna have someone who's fresh in the space, speaking about meditation. Have actually one of our web devs who's also very fresh in the space going to be talking about something else. And so this, give sort of people, the idea came from just give the YC people kind of like a little bit of break. They're running to demo day, but also mixing them with sort of the ethos of blockchain is the idea. So trying to get sort of invite certain types of people there. So trying to get people from Omni kind of networks and NoiseBridge networks. Just like a few people, like we don't have a whole lot of space, but the point is for people to like see the other side of crypto and trying to make it very solar pump themed is kind of like the gist.
Yeah, I think a couple things on that, on both from what you guys are saying. One that I'm pulling out is, and we're doing it in Denver now as well, is having a physical location is so helpful, whether it's a house or like for us, like a blockchain co-working space, that you can just start to have some of these more kind of casual events and to always kind of have an event location. That seems pro. The next thing that I'm hearing is, yeah, this differentiation between these kind of massive, hey, here's a big Ethereum meetup, it's 200 people, whatever, versus like, hey, these are kind of some more hyper-targeted events at people who are deeper into space and have like, and the talks are kind of more complex or what have you. We have that in Denver as well, where we have like a little smaller group for kind of people who are the organizers to chat, for people who are kind of deeper into the space to chat. So I think that's a very powerful thing when you're thinking about community, is what is your segment that you're looking for. Cool, so let's do a quick vote on the right-hand side for how many more minutes you'd like to talk about local community building.
Does anyone mind if I put the address and the date for that one in this little chat?
No, you should put it in the chat, and then I'll add it to something else. Cool. Someone who voted for a 2 and then a 0. So I guess, Robbie, any other final things? You voted for a 2 this time. Other things from your perspective, either tips or questions that you have for people?
I just didn't get one. I just wanted to get pointed out for zeroing out again. So I kind of was like, okay, we'll go with the 2 this time. Question goes out. I mean, look, based on that strategy of trying to target, I guess, people who are working in the space that are going to continuously come to the meetups. Does anyone have any thoughts on like, can that be improved, or ideas around that?
I think it'd be nice to have a weekly open house kind of place to chill out. I mean, I'm just used to that in Vancouver, but you end up getting that ended up being my Saturday night, and all the main crypto people in Vancouver ended up just there. And so then it would be usually pretty dead, but the core people are there, and then you'll see people off the street come in and they're like just super new and they just get super inspired like every single time. And we're just like playing ping pong.
Yeah, this definitely, I'm like doing karaoke. So
Yeah.
like it's like the most like beginner friendly setup where they realize, hey, we're also like people. We're not just like these guys who are like shouting about blockchain in your face. So it's like it humanizes our community.
Yeah.
So it's really great. Yeah.
TerraFun is a great SaaS. It's online. It's just a karaoke setup.
We're if to that point, if you want to come by tomorrow, we're just doing like an open house. Trying it. Another team actually asked us if they could do it at our house, and we're just like, yeah, sure. So apparently they invited like people for non-blockchain from like Singularity University and stuff. I actually don't know much about it, but open invite. I just shared it in the chat if anybody wants to join.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm off to Mexico tonight, but I will be seeing you next week here at our house, and maybe we can hang out on the weekend again.
Yeah. For sure.
Cool. Awesome.
You guys will see each other in the flesh. One final note on just what you're saying there is, I think that that's also a powerful thing that we're also trying to do in Denver, which is making it, it's often the case, yeah, it's like, oh, crypto all the time, talk about crypto, crypto that, and like we're trying to have this after party where it's like, hey, no, this is just people hanging out, going skiing in the mountains, you know, doing whatever. And I think that is another kind of powerful version of things that, yeah, as you guys are saying, humanizes things. Cool, let's move on to the next thing. And we're probably going to do these two more plus 2 vote cards, and then we'll wrap up for today. So with that, this next card is very similar. And we talked a little bit about this other one, but let's go on it a little bit more and just to get some experimental stuff from people here. This is my card around, hey, what kinds of experimental events are people not doing now that people should be doing in the crypto space going forwards?
I think a friend Chelsea does a lot of good ones. Or like, you know, it can be outreach to like, say like even college students or teaching a class.
Yeah, she's insanely amazing.
Yeah, teaching like art and design students. How can you like design like better communities in blockchain?
She partnered with Emily Carr. Yeah, and they ended up having like a blockchain decentralized class, and then they partnered together with BDP and Decentralized Party, and you know they've partnered with blockchain UBC. But I mean, she also does a lot of like different events. She's reached out to IEEE, and you know, that's just kind of what she's been doing, and it's been like, it's amazing. Like she's really experimental in these kinds of events. You know, she's a pro.
We could like connect you guys to her if you guys are interested. Yeah, like I think the class was really interesting because it's not actually nothing about blockchains. It's like how to like design your own decentralized dance party.
Yeah, because it was focusing on DAOs and these decentralized organizations.
Yeah, so like people with like blockchain incentives and community while staying in their area of interest, which I find really cool.
Yeah, I mean and I think there's not enough sort of like cross pollination of skill sets. And you know, you see things like CryptoKitties come up. They're a marketing company and they kill it. You know, I think that what that says to me is people are able to stay in their areas, but feel like they can incorporate blockchain and then be part of a wider community. It doesn't have to be just like this one thing.
I agree with that, and we probably want that intro to do some kind of experimental event. Robbie?
I was just going to say, let's add her to the Telegram chat if she's down.
Yeah. Do you have Telegram?
Yeah, I get Telegram. She finally just got Telegram. I'll get her on it. Yeah.
Something that's on my mind here is, and I don't know, from this experimental perspective, just thinking about like, how can we, at these events, I mean, I don't know, it's like, there's lots of the things that I'm personally experimenting the most with are things around the kind of this like pushing the bounds on both the cross application of decentralized governance, design, systems thinking, things like that. Also, and then also in addition to that, pretty much always trying to have a kind of impact layer to things. And that looks like that could either be something like Mary Merkel, like the event that Robbie threw, or something like, you know, for us, we're like selling a bunch of T-shirts and like giving a bunch of that money to charity, or like making sure that you have like that you're actively, consciously asking the question like, what is valuable? How are you connecting to the Sustainable Development Goals? Things like that. I think it's always good to have those kind of impact layers. And I agree with what Robbie said earlier around like the art piece as well. So I'm not sure though that when I think about what the next thing will be here, and I don't know how Kartik is thinking about this, but how can we make it easier to have a bigger event that is just purely like bottom up crowdsourced, that like there's no like there's maybe a small organizing crew, but really it's just like these small house events that you guys are having, but like a bigger somehow like 500 to 1,500 person event. That's what I personally would love to see.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where again, it's a trade-off, not a multiple things you can pick from. Like it's not like you're trading off something for something else if you can approach that. For ETH Global, like that is not yet a priority. The priority is that we know what we're going to do, and we're going to do this really well. And once that works, we're going to try to scale that to as many places as we can. And that's where you start. Like focus is very important here, especially when you want something to be long-term. So everything else kind of count as a distraction for the time being until we know that what we're trying to do actually works.
Agree with that. Robbie, were you gonna say something as a follow-up?
When you just said like, what's the next level? I think this would take organization, but I would love to see like a live action role playing Game of Thrones style like weekend camping event where like all the crypto people just showed up and there was like dressed knights and there was horses and like it was crazy. That would be like that would be the best thing ever. I think. I don't know how to make it happen, but
it is on my mind. I don't personally own any horses right now. I do think there is something that could be really powerful around some kind of crypto plus Burning Man thing. Just there's so much overlap there, and I don't know exactly what that looks like. But and a lot of people already have their existing Burning Man crews or whatever. But I think that there's some kind of powerful blank slate stuff that could happen there as well.
Every year has been doing something like that. So I mean that's one overlap. I think just kind of solar punk as an idea is a good overlap as well.
Cool. Well, any other thoughts on this one? If not, we're going to go into kind of retro-y mode. Boom, we're going into retro mode. Before we go into full retro mode, is there anything else from anyone that we didn't chat about today that they'd love to kind of spend a couple minutes on, or any kind of top questions? Yep, Jared.
Yeah, so I've been kind of waiting for a chance to kind of say this or ask this, because now that we have a few people, I can kind of get some consensus on this. But even before we were added to Community of Communities, Christian and I kind of started this like CM Community Manager Guild.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like 20, almost maybe 25 people in there from different groups that may not necessarily already in. I don't think they're actually in Community of Communities. Maybe a few are. But I didn't want to just like automatically just because I didn't know what people's ideas is in terms of bridging that. We were kind of more focused on kind of the solar punk kind of stuff. We haven't really done much with it yet. And then Communities is already really built out. So like to bridge that in some way, maybe just add them all into one, consolidate, whatever. But before I did anything, I wanted to actually just bring it up so we can have some consensus on that.
So I think Robbie will be, and I'm not sure if we need to go deep into that now, but I think Robbie will definitely be the lead for determining exactly how that works. Robbie, do you have any thoughts right now on it?
We can just chat offline.
Yeah.
Again, the point of the communities was for community managers to ask for help, as opposed to like building a crypto vibe. So it's really like if you want your content shared, if you don't know what chat platform to use, if you need help recruiting, if you want to improve your skills as a community manager, that's sort of the goal. And for any founders of projects. So if people are on board with that, sure, that's cool with me. But if it's more to like just to kind of hang out and talk about crypto, that's kind of what we're kind of trying to keep it like pure value add and learning. But you can message me offline and see. Like I personally don't have anything against it. I just try to keep the chat less like chatty and more like learning.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking to hear.
Cool. So with that, we're going to go into retro mode, and the way that retro mode works is as follows. So there are, if you go to the Trello board, you can see two columns that I'm adding to the side now that are called plus and delta. And the idea here is the plus is like, what are the things that went well? What are the things that you're like, yeah, this is sweet, this is what I learned or whatever. And the delta, our cards are like, hey, for next time we should try this, or this sucked or whatever. So let's take maybe 3 minutes for everybody to add at least one card to the plus side, and at least one, actually not at least one to the plus side. If you didn't like anything, that's fine, but at least one card to the delta side, so that we can kind of iterate on these going forward, because we're going to try multiple of these different groups as we, in this Community of Communities meta group. So let's take 3 minutes and add some cards there. A little bit more than a minute to finish writing some things, especially in that delta column. Boom. Take 30 more seconds if you have any more feedback. Feedback. We want feedback. Okay, cool. So with that, we can end 3 minutes early. So I guess at a high level, and I'd like to hear Robbie's take on this as well, but these were our first two kind of experimental group calls within the Community of Communities group. We'll share this live stream with the people afterwards. And likely going forward, we might both do some of these lean coffee style things, and we're also going to do some ones where like a expert kind of comes in and chats about like we're gonna have this big like a Facebook community expert come in and give like a talk and have people ask questions. So we're gonna try out some various different things in the group going forward, but definitely expect to see these things happening once a month, once every 2 weeks, kind of in this group. Robbie, do you have any other thoughts on what this stuff looks like going forward?
Yeah, so I actually have two offers for people. One is I'm doing these now to see if they're good, so I'll list them. But I have this guy, CMX Group. It's the largest network of community professionals in the world with 6,000. He's going to give a chat about like decentralized community stuff, and then he's offered recruiting services. So basically, if you want to hire a community manager, a communications pro, you tell them your problems, they start providing you candidates. And then he also has a training program, which is 6 weeks and all videos and stuff. I'm going to look through it to see if it's anything new, but if it's good, he's going to give it to the whole group at a discount. So that's kind of where we were going to start for this. And then my skill is actually just like finding people. So if that meeting goes good, we can find whoever you want to talk. So I'm open to like, in the Telegram channel, just say, hey, I want to learn about this. And then we can find like experts in that topic. So completely open. If you have ideas, feel free to share them. And if there's things you want to learn about, whether it's like even like recruiting stuff, or, I don't know, whatever it is outside of community management, investor relations, PR, design, any of those things, we can find experts. So just keep posting stuff in the Google Doc or in the channel that you want to learn, and I'll try to make it happen.
And Robbie, you'll let us know when, as that dude kind of pops up, and you'll send along a link or something to the group there. Is that right? Yep.
He's going to come back on, actually just going to introduce you to him direct, Reese. He's back from Australia on the 22nd, and we can chat about like what a format might look like. Great.
That all sounds good. Any other thoughts from people before we wrap up here?
I would just one thing I would say to end it is 2 of these in 1 week. I think is too much. Yes. I think going forward we should do like once every 2 weeks, once a month, something like that.
Strong agreement.
I want to add thank you, Reese, for organizing this. I think this is one of the smoothest lean coffees I've ever been part of, online or offline, and it's amazing that not all of us have really talked before. So like, thanks for organizing it. And if you're uploading like a live stream of this, I'm going to share it with my team here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Transparency is my MO, so definitely. And thank you for saying that. I like organizing lean coffee things. So with that, it's 3 p.m. So everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Hopefully it was helpful, and we'll see what happens going forward.
Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you. Thank you, Ola.
Bye, Ludmilla.
Bye-bye.